Welcome everyone back to another episode of the Better Bid Calling Podcast. I'm Joshua Houston, and I'm joined today by a special guest who I've known, I guess, my entire life. And I guess before my entire life, I'm here with my dad, John Houston. My dad has been an auctioneer for about 30 years, give or take, probably a little longer than 30 years now, about 31 or so. Because, Dad, I think you went to auction school around the time that I was born, or maybe you started working around the time that I was born. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you got started in this industry?
Well, Joshua, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm certainly delighted to be a part of this. It's really, really a great podcast. I watch them all, as you well know, and also let me publicly congratulate you on just finishing up and completing your PhD. And so I can refer to you from your first name, Doctor. So we're really delighted to say congratulations on that. I know it's been a long road, and to have that completed. But as far as my background and concern, and as it relates to the auction business, I went to school at the University of Tennessee and got a degree in agriculture, and have worked in agriculture for now over 37 years. But while I was in school, and even before that, growing up, going to livestock auctions and that kind of thing with my granddad, and I always had an interest in auctioneering. But I had a couple of college buddies that got their license while we were in college, and you've been privileged to work with one of those recently, Jeff Stansberry, but also a guy named John Stykes also got their license while in college. And so I got to hanging around with those guys, and we would do charity auctions. We would do auctions on campus and all those kinds of things. And I just really got interested. And it wasn't until later, when I started my professional career, that I went to auction school. And you are correct, Joshua. You were born. I actually left auction school. Didn't complete the last 3 days because you were born early. And I got the call, and at that time, Nashville Auction School was held in Columbia, Tennessee, and Terry Evans owned that school, and he let me complete that later, and so I went on and got my license. At that time, you actually could only sit for the state test certain times of the year, so we went and sat for the state test, and you actually had to sell in front of the auction commission. They gave you some scenarios, and you had to actually sell the scenarios in front of the auction commission. So I was able to get licensed, and then was very privileged to go to work for Gary Realty and Auction, Mr. Ben Gary and James Gary. I showed up there and asked to work a sale. They let me, and so I continue to work with them now, some 30 years later. So just really been a great run in the auction business. It's really one of my favorite things to do. It's one of my best hobbies, and also one of my best career choices as well.
Yeah, okay, very good. So a couple of things to unpack there, because coming to the industry is so much different than how most people are today, particularly with licensure. So Tennessee is pretty strict, in my opinion, on auctioneers and their licensing. So if I have all my details correct, and I may or may not, but as of right now, you have to go to school, pass a state exam, serve as an affiliate auctioneer, or get, I think, 1,000 points, whichever comes first. So you either have to be an affiliate for 6 months or get 1,000 points. And then you go back for another course at auction school, take another state test, and then you get your, I suppose, formal auctioneer's license. You do not have to sell anymore in front of the auction commission. I didn't have to do that when I went about 13 years ago, give or take. That was something that had been done away with. But when I went, we had to apprentice for 2 years. It didn't matter if you got your points or not. You had to put in a 2-year time period. And then there are other states that don't have any license laws. They have certain requirements as to how you conduct your business, but no formal license laws. So I want to ask you, and again, this is all opinion based, and what you've seen in the industry. But do you think that there was value in standing before the auction commission and having to sell an item or two and answer their questions? And what was the state test like whenever you were getting licensed?
Sure, Josh. So the state test was a written test. It wasn't a computerized test. It was actually sitting with a number two pencil, if you will, and taking the test. And but be that as it may, selling in front of the commission, in my humble estimation, should still be required, or in front of some seasoned auctioneers. I know the commission's very busy, but here's the thing: when you're selling a live auction, there's several components of that. One of which is being able to effectively work the audience and being able to effectively uh, communicate the bids in an entertaining way such that you keep that audience's attention for several hours during a sale. And so nothing is worse than getting a license and really not being able to sell the product, to have any product knowledge. And part of the selling in front of the commission is to see if that, because we had to do a 2 year apprenticeship. And during that 2 years, there's a lot of requirements. You had to clerk, you had to sell, you had to ring, you had to do, all of those things, a cashier, and all those things had to be signed off on by your principal auctioneer. And so when you got these scenarios, it was more about, do you know about how to sell a tract of real estate? Do you know when they ask you to sell this Duncan five table, if you know what that is, and so being familiar with what was being sold at the time, and also being able to do, an auction chant, and the commission realized that, hey, you're starting, you're not going to be doing the best auction chant in the world. That was not the case at all, but it certainly let the commission feel good about extending a license.
Yeah, good. So when you got started, you went to Ben Gary, asked to work a sale with him. He let you. And the story that I was always told, and I guess it's true, was that your deal with them was, if you like me, then you can give me an opportunity and I'll appreciate that and I'll do my best for you. And if you don't, no hard feelings, we'll move on and try someone else. And apparently they liked you and have liked you for over 30 years. So tell us a little bit about that first day going into Mr. Ben, because we've had James and his son Joe Spencer on the podcast. So our listeners who've listened for some time know a little bit about them and how they got started. So tell us a little bit about just being a new auctioneer, working with someone who is as seasoned as Ben and James.
Right. Well, it's an interesting story. So I in my early professional career, I had worked with a gentleman named Stacy Turner. Stacy had worked and grown up with the Garys and worked with them, and I was wanting to do an apprenticeship and get my license, and so he put me in contact with Mr. Ben, and I went down. Family operation, really, and a lot of those guys, well, all of them had gone to high school together, started, really young, and all worked together. And so I went in, and I did not know the Gary family. I did not know Mr. Ben, and I asked to work a sale. And if knowing Ben Gary like we do now, you can imagine, what the response was. I said, "Well, Mr. Gary, would you let me work a sale just for nothing, just for the experience, and then maybe we could talk further or whatever." And he did, and it was a farm equipment sale, which was right down my alley, and I'll never forget that sale. It was hot, and we really, this was actually. Uh, an equipment sale. I said it was hot. It was actually cold because it was in February, and so we worked that sale. But I remember that Mr. Gary said, we're going to have a sale Friday night. Next week, you come and help us work that sale at the sale barn. And I worked every sale, as far as I know, for years. And really, the training that I received from them and was just fantastic. And Mr. Ben became as close as my daddy. And so I really uh, developed and even lasting today. Mr. Ben certainly has passed away, but with James, and James is as close as a brother to me, and that's how and Miss Bonetta, is a second mama, and we really appreciate them. But that's been the way it started.
Yeah. So when you started working for Ben, they had a sale at that time every Monday night. And then did they have a sale every Thursday night too? Was it two sales a
Well,
week or just one?
Well, a lot of times it would be on Monday nights for sure, and then there'll be a Friday night sale. Probably once or twice a month there'll be a Friday night sale, and then we'd have our real estate or estates or farm equipment or whatever it might be on Saturday. So there's several weeks there'll be three sales in a week's time, and I really had the opportunity to learn everything from being behind the microphone to ringing, because one of the first sale I ever had the opportunity to stand behind the microphone was in Franklin, Tennessee. It was a big antebellum home, is now a large church on that property, and we were selling that out. And Mr. Ben put me up there selling, and I thought, well, I'll be up here 5 minutes or so. And I started selling, and he just left me up there. he just left me up there. And so I don't know, maybe a couple hours or so, I swapped back, and when I left the microphone, everybody gave me a round of applause, and I'll never forget that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the sales on Monday nights were glassware, mostly consignment, furniture, things like that. The days of having a local consignment auction, I'm not saying that they're gone, but they're rare. I've got a good friend in Georgia who does a weekly consignment auction that has your typical glassware and furniture and household items and things like that. And he's doing really well with it. And it's a live auction. A lot of these people are putting them on online and doing live simulcast if they do it live at all. But the industry for auctioneers, especially in live bid calling, I think is changing so rapidly. Even to the point where the title of auctioneer does not necessarily, and it never has, but even more so today, does not necessarily denote someone who is a bid caller. You can be an auctioneer and not a bid caller. So at the time when you were really getting into it in the mid 90s and early 2000s, having those sales, multiple times a week, live bid calling, and doing things like glassware, the industry has shifted. A set of Fostoria will no longer bring a couple $100s. So, how do you, as an auctioneer, adapt to the shifts of the industry?
Well, there's several things, and that happens in every industry. The hot items back in the day was glassware, and James Gary made himself the expert on glassware. He can tell you patterns and all these types of things, different kinds of fast glassware, Fostoria, Fenton, all those type things. But the demand has changed because the generations have changed, and what this generation wants is completely different than the last generation. The same way with antique furniture. We sell product, Tennessee product. We would sell Lillian Russell in those days a set, $10,000, $12,000, and today, you'll do good to get maybe a tenth of that, maybe. But the demand has changed. But when demand changes, that means the demand for those items are not existent, but there's a demand for some other item. So we have to find out what item is in demand. Uh, the way we go to market as auctioneers, I am one that certainly thrives on the live auction. But as an auction company, being able to get those products online and being able to expand your customer base by doing that is very important. I do think that it'll cycle back around. I think that Americans are going to figure out that the lack of socialization is going to be an issue for a lot of folks down the road, and so there there's going to be a need to have events for socialization, and as you well know, a live auction, a large part of that is the community socialization that comes with
Yeah.
going to a local auction. But I think determining, hey, what's in demand now? How can I capitalize on that? So
Yeah. So when you were in college, you were talking about being involved in agriculture, getting degrees in agriculture. You've worked your entire formal career in agriculture, um, and that you had friends in college who had gone and gotten their auctioneer's license, but were also heavily involved in agriculture and still are. So I guess my question there is, I've I've noticed through the people that I've interviewed and what got them started in the auction business is some, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, it's a tie to agriculture. And I'm wondering if you can comment on the the agricultural aspect and why auctions are so attractive to people who are involved in agriculture versus other industries, if that makes sense.
yeah, so really and truly, if farmers like to one get a good deal, but also know that they got a fair deal, and so farmers thrive on auctions because for the most part they understand, hey, if it's not a good deal, it's still a fair deal. It's still competitive with my neighbors. I'm bidding against my neighbors and community friends, and so there's I don't have to go negotiate with a dealer. I don't have to do all of those things. Plus, I'm helping my neighbor who's having the sale. Maybe it's an estate, maybe someone's passed away, but I'm helping my neighbor by buying their equipment. I'm familiar with the equipment. And that's another thing. A lot of times at a local auction, you're more familiar with what's being sold. Uh, and once again, farmers like to talk to farmers. And that's a good place for everybody to gather up and talk about the weather and talk about, well, my corn's not doing well and this and that. But, one of my college friends that got his auction license in school, which is Jeff that you work with. He started his career selling registered cattle, and that was my interest. Is cattle and livestock, and I would go watch those guys. And another guy who's not a licensed auctioneer but helped Jeff a lot was Todd Stone, who actually works in the co-op system with us, but Todd and Jeff would sell a lot of registered Simmental cattle and other breeds around, and I would go watch them, and I would think, man, that's the ticket. That is, and of course that was a big deal at that time as well. So that piqued my interest. But yeah, farmers and really uh, folks in agriculture tend to have more assets to be sold when it comes time than maybe other, uh, like having a glassware sale or whatever. But typically, farmers have more assets that are worth more money to be sold when it comes time to assets.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think there's a lot there. So you're you've seen so much in 30 plus years of being in the industry, like several of our guests on this podcast have. One thing that I noticed in the last episode with Eddie Abels, who you know very well, and we'll be seeing him in a week or so at the Mule Day contest. But there has been a change not only in the industry formally, but there's been a change in the style of auction chant. It Different regions in America have different styles of auction chants, and it's as I've kind of got into the dissecting of different chants, during the time that Eddie and yourself and James and Ben went to school, and of course, Eddie went to school in North Carolina, but there was a very North Carolina flavor to his chant. And I'm interested in that because now it seems in the Southeast we have more of a Southwestern, maybe more of a Texas style of an auction chant. And so, one thing that you and I have commented on going around to different contests is how much the chant styles have changed over the years. So, maybe talk a little bit about that, your chant style, and how you see different people's chants today.
Well, there certainly is a shift in auction chant style, uh, which is neither good nor bad. It's all about keeping your audience where you need them to be. When we went to school, we learned a more what I would call a more rhythmic, maybe some people would call a slower, more rhythmic chant. Uh, and now the chants are a little more livestock style, I guess, is what I would call. Um, most people equate an auctioneer to a livestock market. That's where most auctioneers, and if you think about an auctioneer, the general public would think about a livestock barn type auction, which is a much different chant, much different style. Um, for instance, selling real estate. I don't know if you've ever had anybody give you an example on here of selling a tract of real estate. But the way I sell a tract of real estate, my chant would be much different, more of a singing style than what is done by a lot of the auctioneers today. When I have gone with you to a lot of the contests, uh, the chants are amazing. I mean, it's really some, and I look forward to Mule Day. I'm planning to be there. There's some fantastic auctioneers coming from all over this country to that premier contest over in Columbia, Tennessee. And I'm telling you, the chants are so different, but it's I think it's an improvement. If you listen to the old Missouri Auction School tapes and things that are out there from days gone by. It's a more uh, rhythmic type. Not that there's not rhythm in it now, but it's uh, a very high emphasis on rhythm, and so yeah, those chants are different. But again, the key is keeping that audience engaged for a 6, 7, 8 hour sale. That's the key. And not wearing your voice out and being able to, I have, there's many times I've watched James and Ben and be on the, sitting back there selling for 6, 8 hours, and you have, I know livestock auctioneers do that, and being able to do that and keeping that audience engaged while not wearing yourself out is key. But those chants are different, and they were taught differently. Uh, and I wouldn't say one's good or one's bad. I would just say, is your auction chant one that would keep your audience engaged for a period of time? So,
Yeah, and I think that's right. I'm seeing a trend now where there's more emphasis on the punching and the clarity of the numbers with a really rapid, choppy filler word in between. And I'm not, again, it's not good or bad. It's just different from what was traditional, 30 years ago with that very, let's say, Ralph Wade-ish style, bouncy ball, elastic chant. Now it seems to be a little more rapid, a little more choppy. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just interesting how, everything has a trend. And as trends go in and out, they usually repeat themselves. So I'm curious to see what will happen in the next 30 years as these auctioneers are learning again. At Nashville Auction School, I think it's one of the best things, and I know Worldwide College of Auctioneering does this too. Probably every auction school does this to some degree, but at Nashville, they bring in a different bid calling instructor every day, and
right.
that instructor has 3 hours with the students, and that can be challenging because what I tell them may not be what the international champion Trey Morris will tell them. I'm not an international champion by any means. And I tell them, if there's something that Trey tells you that you like, listen to Trey. And if there's something that I tell you that you like, listen to me. Or any other instructor. Drew Williams is an instructor down there. Shane McCarroll is an instructor. I don't know who all else they bring in, but they bring some heavy hitters, and um, they will tell you to do one thing, and another will tell you to do another thing. But I think that's helpful because it helps you determine your chant, because no two chants are the same.
Right. You made a comment about emphasis on the numbers, and what I've noticed over the years is that the auction clientele has changed. So years ago, most people that came to an auction were quote auction people. They they knew the lingo. They knew, they were in the livestock barns. They knew, But now I'm seeing the clientele that comes to a live auction are people that are looking for small farm equipment that maybe have purchased 5 or 10 acres, but have never been to an auction before in their life. They're learning the process. They need to understand what's going on, and you need them to understand as the auctioneer. I see at a lot of auctions, in particular real estate auctions, a lot of folks from foreign countries that are there to bid on that real estate, and you have to take measures to ensure that those clientele can understand, because they are certainly good customers of that asset. So uh, the clarity on the numbers is a good thing, versus years ago. You could really go through an auction, and everybody's standing around shaking and howdy, and they could talk to 5 people and be bidding on a piece of equipment at the same time, and now that's not necessarily the case. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that brings us to a good transition then to talk about something else that you're heavily involved in the auction industry, but it's not bid calling. It's being a ringman. So you have extensive experiences being a ringman, and part of the job of being a ringman is communicating, being that middleman between the bid caller and the bidder. So as you're working the ring, and I think it's even more, which I don't have a real estate license, but I've been to several real estate auctions with the company that we work for. Because what we'll do is we'll typically sell real estate first and then sell the personal property. So after the real estate sales, I get to work. But it seems to me that doing the job of a ringman is so much more vital on the real estate side of things than it is the personal property side of things. Personal property, of course, we're standing up there, we're holding the items up, we're bid spotting. We're looking for interested bidders, and we know who our bidders are. So one example in particular, he's since passed away, unfortunately, but Frank Church was always a guy who bought cast iron at our sales. And if we had cast iron, I knew I need to be looking at Frank because he's going to bid. But I never had to persuade him to bid. I knew what he was there to buy. I knew what his limit was. Um, Now, real estate, that's a different story because you may not know your bidders. You may not know what their limits are. And you have to work a little harder, I think, as a ringman there to get them to bid. Of course, we're not trying to make anyone do anything they don't want to do. But again, it's all communication. So talk a little bit about your experience as a ringman and the challenges that come with that.
Well, I'll tell you, Joshua, first let me say, I have one goal on sale day. That's been my goal for 30 years, over 30 years. One goal on sale day is to do whatever I can to make that sale as successful as possible. Doesn't matter if I'm parking cars, if I'm slinging boxes, if I'm taking bids, if I'm working behind the mic. It makes no difference. If I have to go get whoever's on the auction block a bottle of water, whatever the case is, I'm there to do whatever I can to make that sale as successful as I can. But when it comes to ringing, I'll be quite frank with you. Today, it wasn't that way in the past, but today I would much rather ring a sale than sell it behind the mic. I really enjoy being a ringman, and that doesn't say I don't like to get back there and do a chant here and there and love that, but I really have learned over the years how to read people. Of course, I have a job that in sales, I've managed salespeople for years, and and I've learned how to read people, and I can tell when somebody wants to bid. I just I just know what that look is, you know. And again, we learn our buyers, we learn what they buy, the regular customers, but it's also gives you an opportunity to be a showman, and so and I enjoy that part of it because I sometimes I go on with some nonsense, and a lot of you know, all the guys that work with us have been doing it way longer than I have. I've been doing it over 30 years. So, you know, we know what each other's going to do, and that makes it great. And the other thing about being a ringman at our sales is one of the things that, and I haven't seen this anywhere else around my area, but one of the things that's just, I guess, the key to a Gary auction is that we have one person who does nothing but keep the next item up there to sell. So the auctioneer doesn't have to slow down. We don't have to worry about what to sell next. That's their job. And this person is a person that's been doing it for 45 years, knows what the items are, calls the item out, and we're gone. I mean, it's just perfect. And I enjoy ringing. But you talked about real estate. I wanted to mention this. A lot of people wonder uh, about ringing a real estate sale. And I get to a real estate sale early, and I'm talking, standing around. But what I'm really doing is I'm watching everyone who is looking at that house, and I promise you that however it is, I've figured out who's interested in that house. Or in that tract of property or whatever before the sale starts, and I haven't even talked with them. I'm standing back just watching people's actions. And I can tell you the person that gets there an hour and a half before the sale and crawls all over the property, they're never going to give you a bid. It happens every time. But I can watch, and 9 times out of 10, I'm getting bids from folks because I have taken the time. And I'm talking to people, but what I'm really doing is watching what's going on with that property. And so I can pretty much tell who's going to be in on the property, and so a real estate sale is one that I really enjoy being the ring person. Although I've had the opportunity over the years, several sales to be at the microphone to sell real estate, but ringing the sale, and I can. Uh, I do some things that just keeps the audience engaged occasionally. James is crying the bids. I might stop him and, he's asking for 525,000. I might stop him and say, would you take 520? And he'll say, absolutely. And have you got it? And I say, no, but I'm working on it awful hard, and, just really getting into things like that and keeping the audience engaged, and you can. I have learned, I guess, whatever to read people's emotions and know if they're really wanting to be it, and it really is an asset to be able to do that.
Yeah. So you've mentioned several times about learning to read people and understanding who's interested at least and who's not. And I agree with you. It's this way. It's this way with selling cattle. What limited experience I have with selling cattle, the guy who gets there who wants to know everything about the cow. How many calves has she had? Is she are they double vac, and are they how long they've been weaned? They'll never bid on that animal, never. Or they
Right.
might bid once at really cheap and then back out. But I guess my question here is for our listeners who are wanting to, and reading people is something you do behind the microphone and as a ringman. I
Absolutely.
mean, everybody has to learn how to read their bidders. So, what are some things that you look for with these interested parties? If you're sitting behind the microphone or if you're working the ring, what are some things that you're looking for that says, hey, this person might be interested?
Yeah, well, first of all, when you're selling an item and they're sitting there kind of looking around, and they get this blank stare on their face, and hey, they're thinking, I need to get in right here, and so you really are looking for people that are um, that seem to have interest in what you're selling. Now, once a person, for instance, in a gun sale, if someone starts buying lever actions, they buy one or two. Well, when the next lever action comes up, but I want to ask that guy to start me at $1,000. He's going to be interested because he's bought one or two, and so that's what you start reading people by what they're buying, and their how their facial expressions are really important. Uh, and I love the person when you sell something and they whisper to their neighbor, say to their neighbor, "Man, that was cheap." And I've told them several times it wasn't cheap enough. You didn't bid on it. And so that that's and so uh, reading those people and looking at those facial expressions, and and you can learn that certain facial expressions will give you the the nod that, hey, this person's going to bid on this side.
Yeah, I think eye contact is one of the main things too. People will go out of their way to avoid making eye contact with the auctioneer or ringman if they don't want to bid, and then people will go out of their way to make eye contact with you if they do want to bid. So,
Absolutely.
looking at people in the eyes, which is something that my generation and younger is having a hard time with. Seriously, I shake hands with young people all the time in my other job in ministry, and weak handshakes and no eye contact makes for a really bad first impression. So learn
It
how to
does.
look people in the eyes, and because they're going to be looking at you. Okay, well let's see. Here's a good question about being a ringman, and then we'll move on to another section of things I want to talk about. But uh, being a ringman requires a lot of energy, and being an auctioneer does too. In some cases you're standing up, in some cases you're sitting down, having that breath work, being able to use your voice and not let your voice go out. That's important. But being a ringman, especially, is a high energy job. So we had on an early episode of the podcast a past world automobile auctioneer champion, Bobby D. Ehlert. And Bobby D is now in the benefit auction game. And he is just a charismatic person, charismatic as they come. And he's a great personality to be around. And I asked him the same question: how do you stay energized? And his answer was, God just made me this way. It's just how I am. I'm not that way. I can get that way, but I'm not that way. So, what are some things that you do to stay energized throughout the sale and have the very last item the same as the first as far as your persona goes?
There's a couple of things, Joshua. One is that uh, I try to come off with some kind of a nonsense statement every once in a while, just kind of wake everybody up. For instance, one I learned from Ben Gary, something to start crying bids on an item, and somebody bids a third of what it's worth or whatever, and I'll scream out. Ben Gary was notorious for this, but I would scream out, "You're not renting it, you're selling it, aren't you?" And everybody comes to life again, and then here it goes, and so you have to do some things like that, because here's the thing: if I'm not careful, I'll go into a daze.
Mm-hmm.
At hour 4, hour 5, I'll go into a daze, and you don't want to miss a bid. And we are so fortunate with the Garys. I mean, I don't know, we'll miss a bid occasionally, but it's very occasionally, and it's even less likely that we have a tie bid. Now, we have had tie bids, but I tell you, it's very, very, very seldom, and that comes because everybody's been working 30, 40 years together, and maybe the way I stay energized is you tag team with one of the other guys. Like you and I know Scott, and that's worked with the Garys. My goodness, I don't know, maybe 50 years. I don't know. He started way back in high school. Uh, but you can start jabbing back and forth, or somebody drops something, and you make a big deal out of that. And everybody gets their energy back. And because I can tell you, after a long sale like that, some of us old guys, all we want to do is find a corner and collapse after it's over with. But it's and I think all of our guys stay energized through the sale to make sure our audience, and we're doing everything we can to make that sale do well. And you know, uh, if I'm getting a lot of the bids and selling a lot of the items on my side of things as of the ring, so to speak, and I might scream over to Scott, "Are you going to do anything today? Or are you going to work today?" Or something along those lines. Just and all that is to create the energy, to get yourself back in. Because if you're not careful, you'll lose track of what's going on. I've had people ask me, "What did that item bring?" I don't know. I don't know. Because all I'm doing is taking the bid, and then I find myself, getting in a daze. And so you have to, and you can't. I'm at my age today. I can't jump around and run a marathon the whole sale. So you have to be able to do some things with your voice and with your ringing and with your to stay motivated. So
Yeah. Well, on that note, and this will swap us back up to the bid calling side of things outside of being a ringman. But on that same note, advice to those of you who might be listening, wondering what can I do to keep my audience engaged for a 3, 4, 5 hour sale? Swap up your auctioneers, swap up your bid callers for an hour, 30 minutes, hour and a half, whatever it is you deem necessary. Um, we are so arrogant sometimes to think we're the only ones who can ever be behind a microphone. And you mentioned Jeff Stansberry a minute ago. Jeff and I are co-workers together at TriStar Auction Group in Lebanon under Daniel and Nicole Pruitt. And Daniel gets the sale together, and we show up and call bids. And I got to tell you, I am so thankful that Jeff is there. First of all, I've gotten to learn so much and still learn so much from him. But he sells about 20 items or for about an hour, whichever comes first. And then we swap up, and I'll do 20 items or an hour or whichever comes first. And then we'll swap up again. And during the time when he's behind the block, I'm reviewing items. I'm popping a cough drop or getting a sip of water or whatever. But our audience, we do it live simulcast. And so they're watching us on a computer screen, which makes it that much more boring to some degree because you don't have the interaction with live people. So swap up your auctioneers. A different chant can go a long way for about an hour, and then you can swap back up again or whatever. Okay, let's transition then to talk about auctioneering and bid calling again. Tell us what's going on with your auction career today. What does being an auctioneer look like for you today?
Well, today is much the same as it's always been. Certainly, Gary Realty and Auction are doing more online things, but we still have live sales, and for years, as you well know, Josh, well, there was a sale might near every Saturday. We certainly have been fortunate to work with the Garys that have lots and lots of sales, and so. But I typically ring, and then I'll do some relief auctioneering occasionally, but typically my job as a sales to be the a ring person today. We're so very fortunate with the Garys because James certainly uh, is an auctioneer and does a lot of big calling. And of course, Joe Spencer, his son, is a licensed auctioneer. You're a licensed auctioneer, and I'm a licensed auctioneer. And so we have plenty of auctioneer experience to get the job done. One of the things that you talked about, swapping up and that kind of thing. And one of the things that you got to make sure you don't do is change the momentum to the point that you want to do that quickly and get started right back. But I've been asked. I still sell some items, but mainly I'm there getting the sale ready, way before the sale time. Just like everybody else on the crew is. I mean everybody, all the way from James down. We're getting everything ready. And of course, they've been there. James, Joe Spencer, they've been there weeks before getting things ready. So uh, I'm parking cars. I'm getting boxes out. I'm doing, and then ringing the sale and all those types of things. But I'm at the end of the day, if we had a good sale, man, I tell you what, that's my I guess reward if we had a good sale. If we had, maybe we had a house track that we hoped would bring 200 or 300,000 and it brings six. We, I mean, I'm really that's a thrill to me to see that happen.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess what I was trying to get at is you, like me, have a love for the auction profession, but it's not what we do full time. We
Right.
both have full time careers that take the majority of what our time is, and then for me, I work with under James primarily, but I also contract out to others who need help every now and then. You less so. You have worked for other companies, contracting out for them, but you're more tied to James in that respect. So, how do you balance what you do full time with the auction industry? And what might you say to someone who's listening who wants to be more of a vocational auctioneer, let's say, or a contract bid caller who's going to work a full time job and then show up and work a sale on Saturdays?
Yeah, well, there's really a balance, and I've done that, for over 30 years, and I do have a very demanding full time job. A lot of my job in the past has required travel, both around the United States and out of the country, and so I've been able to balance that. It takes a lot of family support because, as you know, when you work your full time job all week as I did, and then maybe I get home on Friday night. You get up and go on Saturday and work a sale, and I am also a minister, and I do. I'm not a full time minister but I could go places and fill in preaching here and there. And I have been a full time minister, and so that's a 7 day a week, and so it takes a very supportive family. But the auction business for me, I have such a love for it that became not only a source of income, but it was also my recreation. It's also, I didn't go play golf, I didn't go fishing, I didn't go, you know, that was my or that is my recreation, and so even though it's a source of income, it's not something that I dread doing. It's something I look forward to do, and
Yeah.
so that is. But yeah, if I was recommending uh, to people who are going to work a full time separate career, and one of the things that I'm just a contract employee, so I'm not out there booking sales. I'm depending on James, Gary, and Joe Spencer. They book the sales, they get the sales ready, and I show up to help. Whatever. But if I had to, if I needed to be out there booking sales, getting the sales ready, I could not do both of those. I could not work in my career, and I couldn't do a seller justice by trying to do all of that around a full time career. I really don't think so. But by being a contract employee, then I'm not dependent on booking a sale for my income. I'm just a contract employee. So
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a place in the auction industry for everybody. If you want to be involved in the auction industry, whatever your life will let you do, I think there's a place for that. So for me and for you, our place is being contract guys who show up to do a specific job on sale day. And sometimes those specific jobs are multifaceted. So you have ring, auction setup. Sometimes we help with checking out. Although with James, we have a saying that we let the ladies take care of that. They don't want us to touch the money, and probably
Right.
for good reason, or bid calling or whatever. So there's a place for everybody, and I think that's important for these new people to learn as they're getting their license and wondering, well, what am I going to do in this industry? Well, there's a place for all kinds. Okay, two more things, and then we'll get to rapid fire questions because we're running out of time. But let's talk a little bit, because we do talk a lot on the podcast about contests. You've
Right.
competed in the Tennessee State contest a few years ago or several years ago, and and done, well, in my opinion, done quite well. You've been with me to several contests and helped me prepare. So, just in about a minute or so, give us your rundown of contests, why you decided to compete when you did, what were your thoughts whenever I started competing, and what might you say about contests today?
Well, it's just very simple about contests. They make you better. Contests make you better. And whether you win, whether you don't, they make you better. The networking of that. I competed in the Tennessee State contest. That time it was just for Tennessee Auctioneers. I competed 7 or 8, maybe 10 years. I don't remember in my early career, and I never had a time that I wasn't in the top three. And I was second 2 or 3 of those times. I never did was able to win that particular contest, but I stood behind some really good auctioneers, and I have relationships with today. For instance, Van Massey. Van Massey won one year. I was second. And I still have a great relationship with Van Massey, both personal and professional. It just makes you better. So if you want to be better, do some contests.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Um, that was my big thing that I asked Peter Garris on the podcast was, when do you know that it's time to stop competing? And he said, well, contests, they always make you better and they have a special place, but it's time to stop competing when you set out to do what you wanted to do. And
Absolutely.
I think that's true. I think that even with contests making you better, I think one way contests make you better is, even if you don't compete, you can pour into the contestants. You can give them something from your experience, or it just show up and bid on some items. One of the most difficult things in a contest is if you go by yourself, you don't have somebody there in the crowd to buy your junk, and just show up and bring you $100 bill and spend $100 on somebody's stuff.
Yeah.
That'll give them a bidder, let them have some experience, and I think that's certainly true. Okay, one last thing, and then we'll get to some rapid fire questions as we end. Um, you mentioned we've talked a lot about James Gary. You just mentioned Van Massey. If the name Van Massey sounds familiar to you as a listener, it's probably because you know Jacob Massey, who is the current World Livestock Auctioneer champion. That's his dad, Van is. And so what we see with James and Van and yourself are generational auctioneers. Now, you're a first generation auctioneer, but if you had never been an auctioneer, I wouldn't have gotten into it. So my question is, I guess somewhat selfishly, my question is, when I came to you about 15 years ago and said, I want to go to auction school, what were your thoughts about that? What
I
did you
was
think, and what have you thought about how things have progressed?
Well, I was thrilled. Certainly encouraged by your desire to do that. Uh, and I knew it would be different for you than it was for me. When you started entering contests, I was like, oh man, here we go. But you know, I hope one of the greatest thrills for me, and whether it's sports or anything else, is to know that you had some part of a coaching a champion. So that's the thrill for me. So I really, that's I like to tell people well, he had a good coach. You hear people talk about you and winning this contest or that contest. I said, well, by gosh, he got a good coach. So, that's the thrill for me. So
Yeah,
I
well,
guess
that's
in
true.
short, that's the answer. So
Well, that's true. It's interesting to me because I go all over the U.S. now, speaking at conferences and for state associations and so forth. Just got back from Arkansas a few weeks ago, and how it's interesting how many fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, or however the generational ties are, how many of those are there, and how many of them. What's really interesting is how many of them are now in competition with one another because a son has gone off and started his own
right,
company and is now competing against his dad. But it's also interesting how many stay together with a generational company. I don't see that in a lot of other industries. I
right,
see it a fair bit in ministry. If your dad was a preacher, typically you go into ministry, but I don't see that in any other industry. So there's something special about the auction industry where there's a skill set and a talent that you instill in your children and raise them up in that industry. So I'm glad that I've had that opportunity. Okay, let's. I got about 8 or 10 or so rapid fire questions. These are just one sentence answers or one word answers, however you want to do it. I ask most all of these at the end of every podcast, so you've heard them all before. You probably know what they are. But question number one: what is the weirdest item that you have sold at an auction?
Well, I wouldn't say that I sold it. I was standing on the stage as a ring person when we sold Sale for Reba McEntire, and I stood there holding Reba McEntire's movie script with her arm around me while we were selling it. So that was probably the weirdest item that I had involvement in selling.
Okay, well, would that also be your favorite item to talk about, or would that be something different?
Actually, it'd be something different. We used to do a sale for Nashville Public Television, suit and tie, makeup, a whole deal. And I got to sell that sale on a couple of occasions. It was weird because people were calling in the landline phones to place bids and that kind of thing. But I remember this one painting that I sold on Nashville Public Television, and it actually brought close to $8 or $10,000 somewhere in that range, and took forever to sell it that way. But that was probably one of the greatest times that I had. So
Okay. What is your favorite filler word?
I don't know, Josh, with that bid to buy something like that, is what I would use. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, you have helped me get ready for so many contests, and you've obviously competed before. So, what advice would you give to someone who is preparing for a contest? What would you tell them to do or to keep in mind?
Keep in mind two things: practice, 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 practice all the time. Practice morning, noon, and night. Practice all the time. And the other thing is remember your audience. It's not just about you that day. It's about the audience. You don't want to miss a bid. I lost a contest uh, to someone in the state contest years ago because there was a lot of things that happened to cause this, but I missed a bid. Okay, so you really have to uh, know that audience and remember that and learn to watch every nook and cranny of that room, that facility. Teach yourself, hey, there could be a bidder way out there leaned up against the truck. You got to watch the whole place, not just a
Mm-hmm.
certain area. So
Yep.
train
Yep.
yourself to do that.
Good. What's one piece of advice you would give a novice auctioneer?
Stay with it. Don't worry about getting to a sale and working a sale and not getting behind a microphone that day. Stay with it. Do what's necessary to have a successful sale. Practice, practice. So when you do get that opportunity, you're ready to go. And just it's stamina. Stay with it.
Who are some auctioneers that you love to listen to?
Well, right off the bat, Josh, I'm going to say you. I do listen to you a lot. I listen to your auction, but I think you really do a great job. Um, but there, and I don't know this guy's name, but there's an Amish auctioneer that I listen to a tremendous amount that I just really love the way he does a sale. I really love his auction chant. I wish I knew his name. I don't, but I really enjoy listening to him. And there's several. Jacob Massey's one of those guys I really enjoy as well. So
Yeah. You talking about those Amish auctioneers. I know we're running out of time, but talk about chant style differences.
absolutely.
I don't know what it is. I think it comes from the Dutch background of a lot of those Amish guys, but man, it's a different style for sure. Okay, one final thing, and we'll bring this podcast to a close. If you wouldn't mind selling something for us, let us hear some of your chant, and then we'll be done.
Well, would you like me to sell a tract of real estate
Sure, that'd be
or
fine.
sell it?
Doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do.
Okay. All right. What do you give on a good house here? How many dollar here? Hey, with a 500,000. Hey, with a 500,000 here. What do you get 500,000? 525. What do you get 525,000? Hey, with a 525,000 here. Hey, with a 525. What do you get 525? Now 5.5. Hey, what do you get 550,000? 550,000 here. What do you get 550,000? Hey, with a 550,000. Now 575. What do you get 575,000? Hey, 575. 75. 575,000. 575,000 here. Hey, 575, 75, 75, sold it $550,000.
Very good. I've heard that chant my whole life, and it never gets old. So thank you for being on today, Dad. It's been special for me, and look forward to working more sales with you down the road, of course, with James. And we work together a lot on benefits and things like that, too. So I guess we'll see you probably in a couple of days at church if we don't see you before. But with that, guys, we'll close this podcast. Thank you for listening again. Be sure to share this, like, comment, subscribe on Spotify or YouTube. And we're looking forward to having many more guests on for the coming year. So stay with us. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you later. You've been listening to the Better Bid Calling podcast. If you would like to sponsor an episode, please contact us at betterbidcalling@gmail.com.